and gentlemen, good afternoon. Day 2 of the Zero Project Conference 2025. We are live here from the United Nations office at Vienna, and the topic could not be more pressing: disability, inclusive, disaster, risk reduction. My name is Weis, and as the Director of International Affairs at the Zero Project, it is my pleasure to be joined by our distinguished speakers today. And as I mentioned, the premise for today's session is actually quite a simple one, because when society faces an emergency, everyone is affected. Everyone, that is persons with and without disabilities, and especially on the component of persons with disabilities, we will be hearing from organizations who do not only understand the challenges that are evident when it comes to crisis response, but understand also the solutions that can be found in these times. And you're wondering, well, why is Robin here from the Zero Project talking about it? It's quite simple. We have heard you as a global disability community over the past years to say there needs to be an entity that is collecting good practices from around the world when it comes to crisis response. And we've listened to you. And for the first time in over a decade, the Zero Project is changing its research cycle. Starting in this May 2025, the Zero Project Call for Nominations 2026 will be adding the topic of crisis response to its research cycle. And therefore, it is my distinguished pleasure to hear from our organizations, which will tell us why this is the right move and the smart move and long overdue. And without further ado, I would like to start with our first speaker, and it's in the title. So I think, we talk about DRR, and we have someone from the UN DRR, specifically Stefanie Dannenmann-Di Palma, the External Relations Officer from the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And before I hand over the microphone, like an evacuation, everything comes down to timing. So I would encourage all of our speakers to stick to 5 minutes, after which we will go into a Q&A. And I'm going to have to disappoint you ahead of time. This is an important topic, and we have 25 minutes. We won't have all the answers, but we will find those answers in the conversation that will ensue after the session. And with that being said, Stefanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you for inviting me to come. It's my first Project Zero conference, and I'm extremely impressed by the topics that are being covered, and also by the innovation that I see throughout this conference. And for me, it's something that actually we need when it comes in the field of disaster risk reduction. I will not talk too much about crisis response, because in my organization, we'll talk about reducing the risk to disaster. So if if a hazard turns into a disaster, that means the work that we have been done is not good enough. And for us, the definition of a disaster is the hazard. It's a natural hazard, it could be technical hazard, combination with the vulnerability. And the vulnerability is made out of how people live, where do they live, and how much are they exposed to a hazard. And that a combination could turn into a disaster. So the blueprint for, so many of you know the climate agreement, the SDGs agreement, but what very few people know is that the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction was the first agreement adopted in 2015 in Japan, and it was a very hard negotiation because there's language included that are relevant to the SDGs and also to the climate part. And the whole aim is really to reduce the risk and the lives and losses and livelihoods and assets to any type of disasters. So we had 4 priorities of action. It was the understanding of the risks, strengthening the risk governance, investing into resilience, so it's a financial investment underneath it, but also thinking about effective response and building back better. What does it have to do with the inclusion side? In the preparation of the Sendai framework, the government of Japan had a very key interest that the meeting is accessible to all. And this is how I came on board. I'm a geologist by training, and they said everyone had to volunteer something, and I knew nothing about, disability too much about, not nothing, but it was not a topic that I connected automatically. And so I've been learning since then. But with the participation of persons with disability in the negotiation, in the preparation of it, you could see and find that the Sendai framework makes very strong reference on the inclusion side. It recognized that persons with disabilities are often disproportionately affected, the need of inclusion and engagement of persons with disability at all levels. So after the adoption, and in preparation in 2013, we had undertaken a survey to know what is the status of the persons with disability. And 10 years later, I thought, let's do the same survey again, maybe add a couple more questions to it, and to find out where are we? Because we've done a lot of advocacy work, and the survey is quite frustrating, and I think it's no news to you, because you experience it probably on a daily basis, but really limited progress has been shown. It has 84% of the persons with disability to report it that they have no personal preparedness plan ready. And it didn't matter if you look into Europe, in Africa, in Asia, anywhere in the world, it was basically more or less the same numbers, because we could look where people were coming from. And the plans were not there, 11%, and the leadership roles. Are you saying I need to stop? No. Okay. And then also there was no dedicated leadership roles of it. So people were not in the place to help making decisions. So obviously advocacy is not good enough. In our environment, persons with disabilities are there. Our meetings were becoming more accessible and inclusive, but it didn't make a change. So thankfully, with governments that are supporting to us, and in 2023, we got the first time some dedicated funding from the government of Finland. And here we were able to develop 2 tools. So one tool was through the government of Finland. It's a cities tool. And the city tools that we had was just looking at how cities are prepared for climate and disasters in general. But what we were able to do is developing a question catalog where you can bring cities officials together with the disability community and help asking questions. Because what we observed is that no one has anything against it to talk about disability inclusive DRR, but then when they're on the table, nobody knew what to ask each other. And so with this catalog, that was sort of like a game changer. And just to give, to this conference we talk about job creation. And just earlier, I've learned from my colleagues in Astana who rolled out the city guidelines in Kazakhstan, in Astana. The consultant that we had hired to help rolling it out was hired by the government of Kazakhstan as a disability advisor, and she's a woman in a wheelchair. So with this tool, we start creating some type of changes, and we've seen it also in other places around the world. And another tool that we have developed is in the early warning context, is a gender and disability guidelines. And here again, the idea is now at the national government level to bring the disability community with the government together to talk what does it mean early warning. And this is a game changer when it comes to discussion. So for me, my final slide is, disasters are not natural. So in our context, we don't talk about natural disasters. We just talk about disasters because it's the human context, how we live, where we live, that is causing our disasters. And with that, I'm really looking forward to the Zero Project further engagement and the adventure that's coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefanie. And I think the human context is the perfect segue to our next speaker. And just to underline again Stefanie's point that 84% of persons with disabilities do not currently have a personal preparedness plan. And again, why we want to do more research and collect the good practices in this regard. And it's my distinguished pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Julius and Ntobuah, and hopefully I pronounced that correctly, the chairman of Newcomers with Disabilities in Sweden. Julius, the stage is yours.
Thank you for giving me the space. And yes, you pronounce it correctly. The slides?
And if we could also get Julius's slides, thank you. not a Zero Project team member pictured.
Selfie.
In the meantime, I'll audio describe the, okay, wonderful.
Yes. So, as you all know, my name is Julius, Ntobuah, the board chairman of Newcomers with Disability in Sweden. Newcomers with Disability in Sweden is a disabled refugee-led organization. I'll be talking today on disability inclusion and disaster management. I titled my presentation, Crisis Response and Disability, a Critical Gap, because this is something that is a matter of life and death, and yet people with disability are often left behind. And the impact is not always proportionate. We always feel the impact more than non-disabled person. So for us, it is very, very important topic that we are not left behind in this discussion. And then why are we taking these topics very important is because we've seen that there is a problem of accessibility whenever there is a disaster, and inclusion during planning and during the response itself. Most people with disability are not part of it, which is a big problem. Now, what are some of the challenges faced by people with disability? Well, I took a case study of the war in Ukraine, which we all saw, that there were limited accessible evacuation route and shelters, and then there was lack of inclusive communication, example, sign language or plain text, or the braille even. There was insufficient medical insufficient medical support tailored to the need of people with disability during this crisis. I read an example which I included on my slide here, which is a family member with a member using a wheelchair struggle to relocate safely in the shelter. Then, but that is not only the only challenges that people with disability face during crisis. I tried to summarize it in bullet points here in this other presentation. We saw that people with disability are often left behind, or they are being delayed during the evacuation due to either inaccessible transport or route options. Then there is the fact that those who are in charge of the evacuation are not trained. They are not prepared to evacuate people with disability. They lack the training. And during the training, people with disability themselves are not always included. And then failure to integrate accessibility in the crisis response policy framework. As I was saying, some of these decisions are taken without consulting people with disability, what their needs are. People just sit in their offices, design something, and think it's going to work. So,
Could we get the slides up from Julius, please? And as you can tell, Julius is a sought-after expert because those are the wrong slides. And as you could tell, Julius is a sought-after expert. Getting calls in the middle of a session just comes to show that there's a great demand, Julius. There's a great demand. If we could get the slides of Julius, thank you. And
yes, I think we are here due to time constraint. We already talked about the challenges and some of the outcomes. So we're going now to some good examples, because not everything is bad. At least there's some hope. I took the example of AARP, a community challenge grant partner with World Institute of Disability to improve the disaster preparedness for people with over 50 that has a disability. I think this was very good because their project really shows the preparedness and improve those who are ready to go in the field. They were including people with disability in their approach, which makes it a little bit more accessible. Then we have the DRR, which their mission was to bring together disabled-led organization, foundation, companies, and other allies to identify needs and link partners to accelerate assistance and resource before, during, and after a disaster, which is very good because it prepares, it gives training, it outlines the needs of the community. So even after the disaster, they continue the discussion so that they keep the momentum going in this direction. So those are some of the good examples I thought we could share that is worth emulating or copying for us to be able to prepare whenever a disaster comes. So yeah, with that, I would like to say thank you. It was just a 5-minute presentation. As you said, although sorry for the interruption.
Not at all, Julius, never an interruption. And as I mentioned, this is only the beginning. We're not going to get all the answers in this session, but please do approach Julius and all of our speakers after to continue this conversation, because I'm very sure the Q&A will exhaust the time we have. And Julius, you talked about not only the case study of the war in Ukraine, but also the lack of training. And there are organizations who, when fire happens, run into the fire and try to figure out and find the solutions. And this, for me, is the perfect segue to our next speaker, Michal, the CEO of Access Israel, who will tell us exactly on the training programs she's been able to set up for disability inclusive disaster risk reduction. Michal, the floor is yours.
Thank you. 5 minutes. Whoa, let's do our best. I do invite each and every one of you to contact us, because I can assure you I'm not going to be able to convey everything I want to share with you, and we have a lot to share. I will start by saying, quoting a lady with a lot of experience in emergency. We went to a meeting with her. I won't mention from which organization, but when I was talking there about the importance of accessibility in times of emergency, she was sitting like this, and at a certain point she said to me, wait, don't you think accessibility in emergency is a luxury? And I can tell you, as somebody who is like fighting this war for so long, I was stunned and even speechless, if anyone can believe that on me. And my response to her was, who gives you the luxury to decide who dies and who does not? Because when you do not have accessibility in disaster or in crisis, then you're giving very little chance for people with disabilities and elderly to be saved. And this is what we're all about. So the Purple Vest mission, I think we have been talking here at Zero Project for several years about this project. We started it following the war in Ukraine and continued with lectures and train the trainers and delegations really all over the world. And the idea is that preparedness is the key. I think you mentioned not getting to the point of disaster, but because disasters do happen, we have to make sure that we are prepared. Every year I come here and present at Zero Project, the Purple Vest, the beauty of it is every year it changes, it evolves. The model is there, but the customization for each country, for each culture, for each disaster is there and is very easily adapted. Our mission is to ensure preparedness and accessibility in times of emergency, leveraging on the human factor. Many times I've been heard saying, take the human factor, turn it into a human ramp. That's the key. So it's awareness, it's training task force on the ground. You were talking about first responders. It's great they get training and they are heroes, but if they take down a person with disability with crutches and leaves them in the middle of the street, without cell phone, without electricity, and rush to save the next one, well, that person, again, his chances are not really good. We need to make sure the accessibility is as sequenced as possible. So it's real-time assistance and information before and information during emergency. Now, I will also say that one of the enlightening things that we have learned in the past year or two is that usually we talk about, in the field of disability, about visible and non-visible disability. In emergency, we have to remember that we are talking about two more differentiations, about disabilities you know are there, whether they're visible or not. But in emergency, a lot of people can have disabilities that appear in a disaster, whether it's a mental breakdown, anxiety, or being injured. And you don't really know how to act in that. So the preparedness part helps. Now, this is all the time I have, so I will dive into how you can join this, because this is relevant to each and every one of you, each and every country, on a country level, municipality, or organizational level. The model of the Purple Vest mission is human. Volunteers, training volunteers, taking the purple from the Leave No One Behind Purple 3rd of December, putting it on a vest and saying, we are here for you. We know how to recognize, how to communicate, how to assist people with disabilities in emergency. Today, we added onto that an app, a global app, where every trainee of the Purple Vest can register to the app, and in his country can be contacted if there is a need for assistance, for accessible assistance. Now, any one of you can turn to Access Israel, ask to join the force of volunteers, or maybe join your organization, municipality, or country. We're looking for national and organizational partnerships. And I will stress, Purple Vest is a model, but has to have the customization of your needs. Every country has different needs. We're looking for those local facilitators, and what we prefer to do is establish local cells of volunteers that know their neighbors. The first responders I heard in Turkey when there was the earthquake in 2023, sometimes was the teenage boy who throws the ball in your yard, but he was the first one there trying to assist and help because he happened to be there. So we have to make sure our neighbors know who we are, know what our needs are, can point out to first rescuers where we are and how we can be contacted. We create a volunteer network and provide ongoing training, information, and refreshing course. The picture you see here is something we're very proud of, because even during this tough year and a half that Israel has gone through, we are continuing to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And Shelley, who's sitting here in the first row, led a delegation to Uganda of Purple Vest, to the largest refugee camp there, Bidi, and really, came and made a change there. I will rush into it, but this is what our training curriculum includes, not just knowledge, but really experience, really, getting to know the people behind the disability. And this is the app I was talking about, and last sentence, which I promised Robin to include. In the call for nominations that Zero Project will send in May, please note, there are technologies who are meant for the general public. They have to be accessible. There are technologies who are meant for accessibility. Of course, they have to be accessible. And there are technologies who didn't mean to be accessible and didn't mean to help in emergency. But guess what? If you think in the right context, you might be a lifesaver. So when you nominate your innovation, you nominate your technology. We have technologies like Google's Translate. I'm not sure that they thought emergency when they did it. I can tell you in Ukraine, it helped a lot. I can tell you in Uganda, it helped a lot. If you have here Ira or Be My Eyes, who opened this conference the first day, that can assist in times of emergency. So when you nominate, think emergency and ask yourself, can I be the next technology that can save a life? Thank you, and contact Purple Vest. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Michal. And this will be a world's first, because I'm willing to bend my own rules. We're over time, but I'm going to take two very quick questions, because I think we have those questions. The gentleman in the wonderful yellow tie and the gentleman in the blue shirt without a tie. Please, short questions, which the three speakers will announce, and then we will close out. Sir, in the yellow tie, please. Thank you for the question. I'll collect the second question.
Mrs. Rimon mentioned that it's important to adapt the model of the purple vest to the specific cases. I'm curious how it will be adapted to a case which I'm sure will be very close to your heart, which is one of the places with the highest proportion of people with disabilities, which is Gaza. At the moment, with 80,000 people with severe disabilities, according to the WHO, 20% of them have life-changing limitations, limb, spinal cord, traumatic brain injuries, and particularly children. In this context, how could this very innovative model be adapted to assist these people in critical need? Thank you very much.
So, to the three speakers, question one, how are we accounting for persons with learning disabilities and disasters? Question two, how are we accounting on how can we help on the situation in Gaza? Anyone, please?
I can gladly answer. First of all, regarding the first question, I was talking about accessible information. Okay, information should be accessible also for people with learning disabilities, and this is something that can help. And the training itself should be adapted to the needs and to make sure it's done in an accessible way. Regarding the situation in Gaza and in many other countries around the world, I can tell you that Access Israel for many years already, and by the way, it's thanks to the contacts here at Zero Project, we have translated the Access Israel website into Arabic and to English, into Hebrew. And when we did the Purple Vest on purpose with the assistance of the Nippon Foundation, we translated it into all languages of the UN. And of course, when Turkey needed, we added Turkish and Ukrainian, etc. The model is there. The information is there. Those who want to contact us, we're here to help. Those who do not want to contact us, our information and assistance and knowledge is there to share. I think this is the Zero Project mode, this is the Access Israel mode, and this is something we believe in, and we don't just talk it, we practice it. So, invite everyone.
We'll close out with Julius and his thoughts. Thank you.
No, yes, thank you. Yes, I was just going to add that every solution has to be accessible and adapted to local context. So, yeah, that's all I can say, because disabled people are different with unique needs. So one solution cannot just be universal for everyone. So it has to be flexible enough to be adapted to each and everyone and within the local context. So thank you.
Wonderful. And here I go breaking my first rule by a second rule with Stefanie with the last sentence. Go ahead, Stefanie.
No, I just wanted to invite you all to come to the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, which takes place in Switzerland, Geneva, beginning of June, first week in June. It's accessible to all with sign interpretation, and there's special discussion on disability taking place. And I would love to have a broader community to come. Thank you.